We like to believe that humanity is on an upward trajectory, that with each passing generation, we become wiser, more enlightened, more capable of solving the challenges that face us. We build institutions, create systems of knowledge, and celebrate the power of reason. But what if our faith in progress is misplaced? What if, beneath the veneer of civilization, lurks a force that threatens to undo all that we've achieved? It's not a malevolent conspiracy, not a shadowy cabal of evildoers. It's something far more insidious, far more pervasive, and far more difficult to combat. It's stupidity, not mere ignorance, the lack of knowledge that can be remedied with education, but a willful, almost defiant rejection of knowledge, a closing of the mind, a deliberate embrace of falsehood, a refusal to engage with critical thought. Imagine a virus that doesn't attack the body, but the very capacity for reason. That is the nature of the stupidity I'm talking about. This isn't a matter of political correctness or intellectual snobbery. This is about survival. This is about understanding the force that could very well lead to our collective downfall. And the scariest part? It's already happening. Bonhoeffer's insight, the fortress of unreason. To truly grasp the danger, we must journey back to the darkest chapter of the 20th century, to Nazi Germany. There, a theologian named Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a man of profound faith and unwavering courage, stared into the abyss. He resisted the rising tide of fascism, knowing that his defiance could cost him everything. He witnessed firsthand the horrors of the Nazi regime, but he also recognized something even more terrifying at its root, the willing blindness that allowed it to flourish. Bonhoeffer didn't see stupidity as simply a lack of intelligence, a cognitive deficit. He saw it as an active resistance to thinking, a deliberate choice to remain ignorant, to cling to comforting illusions, to reject any information that challenged a pre-existing worldview. Imagine trying to build a bridge with someone who insists on using only the materials they already have, even if those materials are flawed, inadequate, or simply wrong. That's what it's like to reason with someone consumed by stupidity. Evil, he argued, can be challenged, debated, confronted with logic and moral force. But stupidity? Stupidity is a fortress built of self-deception, impenetrable to reason. He drew a crucial distinction between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance is a blank slate, a lack of knowledge that can be remedied with education, with open-minded inquiry. Stupidity, on the other hand, is an active rejection of that opportunity. It's a deliberate filling of that blank slate with nonsense, with misinformation, with comforting lies. It's like preferring the darkness of a cave to the sunlight of knowledge. Bonhoeffer witnessed ordinary Germans, not inherently malicious, enabling the Nazi regime through their passive compliance. They chose not to question the propaganda, not to challenge the authority, not to think for themselves. They embraced the simple, seductive narratives of hate and division. It wasn't malice alone, it was a terrifying abdication of intellectual and moral responsibility. The corrosive power of authority, the Dunning-Kruger effect on a grand scale. And here's where the picture gets even darker. Power doesn't just attract stupidity, it amplifies it, weaponizes it. Think of it as the Dunning-Kruger effect, the phenomenon where incompetent people overestimate their abilities, playing out on a societal scale. Those who rise to positions of authority often become less inclined to listen to dissenting voices, less willing to challenge their own assumptions. Power creates echo chambers, reinforcing biases and silencing critical thought. The higher you climb, the more insulated you become from reality. How many leaders surround themselves with people who will tell them what they want to hear, rather than what they need to hear? How many organizations stifle dissent, rewarding conformity and punishing independent thought? This creates a breeding ground for bad decisions, for irrational policies, for injustice and oppression. It's like a ship captain refusing to listen to the warnings of the navigator because they are too convinced of their own superior knowledge. The consequences can be catastrophic. The real danger, Bonhoeffer understood, wasn't just evil people in power, but stupid people in power. People incapable of engaging with complexity, unwilling to question their own actions, blinded by their own arrogance and self-interest. Their unthinking obedience to authority, or their own inflated sense of self-importance, makes them incredibly dangerous instruments of destruction. They become puppets dancing to the tune of disaster. The banality of Eichmann's desk, the normalization of horror. Hannah Arendt, the brilliant political theorist, explored this phenomenon in her groundbreaking work on the trial of Adolf Eichmann, one of the chief architects of the Holocaust. What she found wasn't a monster, but something far more disturbing: an ordinary man. Eichmann wasn't driven by a burning hatred, but by a chilling lack of thought. He was a bureaucrat, a cog in the machine, diligently following orders without considering the human cost. He didn't hate anyone, he just didn't think. This, Arendt called the banality of evil. Evil, she argued, can thrive not only in the hearts of psychopaths, but in the minds of those who simply fail to think critically about their role in larger systems. It's the normalization of horror, the acceptance of atrocities as just another day at the office. Eichmann's thoughtless obedience, fueled by stupidity rather than malice, allowed him to become a key player in one of history's greatest crimes. He was, in Arendt's words, terribly and terrifyingly normal. And Arendt warned that modern societies are particularly vulnerable to this kind of thoughtlessness. The pressures to conform, the overwhelming flood of information, the discouragement of dissent, all create a fertile ground for intellectual passivity. We become Eichmanns in our own lives, passively accepting injustice, blindly following orders, failing to question the systems that shape our world. Bertrand Russell, the towering intellect of the 20th century, lamented the growing trend of society rewarding ignorance and penalizing intelligence, particularly in the realms of politics and public discourse. He saw it as a kind of societal self-sabotage, a deliberate undermining of the very faculties that could help us solve our problems. Russell argued that foolishness often triumphs over intelligence because simple populist ideas are far more appealing than complex, nuanced arguments. A leader who offers easy answers and catchy slogans is often more successful than one who presents a thoughtful analysis of a problem. It's like preferring a sugar rush to a nutritious meal. It might feel good in the short term, but it leaves you ultimately weakened and depleted. This creates a culture where intelligence is seen as a burden, a liability, and superficiality is celebrated as a virtue. In such a society, critical thinkers are ostracized, marginalized, or simply ignored, while those who pander to the lowest common denominator are rewarded with power and influence. The rise of mass media and social media has only amplified this dangerous trend. We live in an age of information overload, where it's increasingly difficult to discern fact from fiction, truth from falsehood. Echo chambers and filter bubbles reinforce our existing biases, shielding us from dissenting viewpoints and creating a false sense of certainty. It's like living in a hall of mirrors, where every reflection confirms our own distorted image of reality. Russell's warning is more relevant today than ever before. The contagion of unreason, the pandemic of the mind. And here, at the heart of the matter, lies the most terrifying truth of all. Stupidity is contagious. It spreads through societies like a virus, infecting minds and eroding the very foundations of reason and critical thought. It's a pandemic of the mind. Irrational beliefs and simplistic ideas gain traction, not because they are true, but because they are repeated often enough, reinforced by social pressure, and validated by those in positions of power. It's a form of mass hypnosis, where people willingly surrender their critical faculties and embrace comforting illusions. This contagion of stupidity erodes independent thought and critical reflection on a collective level, leading to disastrous consequences. From the Salem witch trials to the rise of fascism, history is littered with examples of society succumbing to the seductive power of unreason. This isn't just about individual failings. It's about the complex psychological and social dynamics that encourage conformity, discourage dissent, and create environments where thoughtlessness thrives. It's about the subtle ways in which we are all susceptible to the siren call of stupidity. We are all vulnerable to this contagion, and the only way to protect ourselves is to build up our intellectual immunity. The antidote, a call to intellectual arms, cultivating a culture of reason. So, is there any hope? Can we break free from this cycle of stupidity and self-destruction? Can we create a world where reason triumphs over unreason, where knowledge is valued over ignorance, where critical thought is celebrated as a virtue? The answer, I believe, is yes. But it requires a conscious, deliberate, and sustained effort on the part of each and every one of us. It requires an intellectual awakening, a commitment to cultivating a culture of reason. We must cultivate critical thinking skills in ourselves and in others. We must question everything, challenge assumptions, and demand evidence for claims. We must be willing to engage with diverse perspectives, to listen to those who disagree with us, and to consider the possibility that we might be wrong. We must embrace intellectual humility, recognizing the limits of our own knowledge and the importance of lifelong learning. We must resist the pressure to conform, to blindly follow the crowd, to accept easy answers. We must be willing to speak out against injustice, to challenge authority, and to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's unpopular. We must be intellectual rebels, challenging the status quo and fighting for a world where reason and evidence prevail. And we must demand accountability from our leaders and institutions. We must hold them to a higher standard of intellectual honesty and critical thinking. We must call out hypocrisy, challenge misinformation, and insist on transparency and accountability. A choice between light and darkness. The future of reason. This isn't just about being smart. It's about being responsible citizens. It's about recognizing that our ability to think critically is essential to the health and survival of our societies. It's about choosing reason over ignorance, truth over falsehood, and light over darkness. The fight against stupidity is not just an intellectual exercise, it's a moral imperative. It's a fight for our future, a fight for our humanity. The choice is ours. Will we succumb to the seductive power of stupidity, allowing unreason to triumph and plunging our world into darkness? Or will we embrace the challenge of critical thought, cultivating a culture of reason and building a future where knowledge, understanding, and wisdom prevail? The fate of civilization may depend on our answer. The stupidity pandemic is a threat to us all. What will you do to fight back?